Hi, it's Winton Churchill here, and I'd like to welcome you to our Freelance Friday call where we talk about all things freelancing. Happy to answer any questions you might have. We'd like to welcome everybody coming on the line right out of the chute, and also those of you that are participating on the playback. About 90% of the people that watch this watch it on the playback, which obviously makes it more convenient for you and a way to stay tuned in without having to be here live. So, the thing I wanted to talk a little bit about today is uh, things that you're thankful for, as with respect to online freelancing and freelancing in general, because this is we've been through some crazy year and a half stuff. A lot of people displaced, a lot of people dealing with obviously the health situation associated with the virus activity over the last period of time. Um, a lot of people separated from their families, a lot of people separated from their office and their work and that kind of thing. So there's just been lots and lots of disruption, certainly more disruption than we've seen in the past, you know, 50, 60, 70 years. Some people are saying it's kind of on the class of a 29 depression, sort of 1929 depression sort of event. So it certainly creates lots and lots of ripples with things, but there are, a silver lining to every cloud. And that's what we're going to talk about today is what are the things that you're uh, thankful for. And I guess the first thing I would start off with is being thankful that we now have some ways to control or minimize the spread of the virus, and things are going back to normal in that regard. In some ways, offices are going back to work. Um, Kids are going back to school, so there's a return of normalcy, uh, and so that has created some economic activity, things that organizations are having to staff up, and they really don't have the staff. They're having trouble finding the staff. And so as we go into this Thanksgiving week next week in the United States, and I know that many of our listeners are around the world, we have participants in our program from all over the world. So you may not have Thanksgiving, but it's always a great time to take a look and see what we might think we're thankful for. And so the first thing I came up with is because of the pandemic, more people than ever before get that remote work is possible. I've been doing remote work for over 20 years now, and if you roll that back to the time that I first took a computer with me, a laptop with me on an airplane, that would probably put us back around 1986, 87, I guess, is when I first did that. So that's even longer than that. But the modern day portable computer person, as we know, really came along about 20 years ago, and I'm certainly there carrying one. But there has always been a bias against portable work. There was this feeling that you had to be in the office with somebody looking over your shoulder to make sure that real work was getting done. And what we've learned through the pandemic is that people are actually much more productive from home than they were in the office. Now, there are certainly reasons to be in the office, and there's nothing, if you want to hash out a complex problem that might take a couple hours, there's nothing better than all being in the same room at the office rather than trying to do it on a Zoom call or something like that. But the big gain over the last mm, 18 months, I guess you'd say 16 months, is this idea that many organizations that thought that they couldn't do remote work, that their business was simply too complex. Everybody needed the access to the computer and the network in the building. It just was too difficult to extend it out to their home. They couldn't maintain security. These were all concerns, and all those have been pretty much banished. There's lots of reports out in surveys that show that people are 2 to 3 times as productive at home in some cases. There are some surveys that show that on an average, employers, CEOs of companies, felt like they got an extra 2 hours a day out of their employees. Makes sense. They're able to work from home. They're able to work in comfortable clothes. They don't have to have a half-hour commute. There's all these advantages to making that happen. And so that is the first thing to be thankful for. The next thing that comes to mind is that as a group, people that are 50 years old or more are most adversely affected by the pandemic. The virus is rougher on that group, that age group, 50 and above, than any others. And it's to the point that I've heard over the last few months different people talking about, yeah, I've been working at home for a year and a half and my company's getting started up again and we're going back into the office. And these are Fortune 1000 companies. These are massive companies with tens of thousands of employees, where mostly everybody is still working at home. And so the people that are in our programs tend to be 50 and up. And as I have talked to them, a lot of the organizations that they work for have said that people 50 and up are going to be the last people to come back into the big office building, the corporate office, the big facility, whatever it might be, because of this factor that they are, as a group, we are more adversely affected by uh, the virus. And so the great thing about that is that working remotely and working as a freelancer are the thing that I'm thankful for, is that exists, because there are a lot of people that if you couldn't go back to the office, if you're 52 years old, you've got at least 10 or 15 years of career left. And to be denied the opportunity to be part of the office, you know how, if everybody's back at the office and you're not there, you're going to be missing a lot of stuff. You're not going to be in the meetings. You're not going to be, having those casual conversations in the hall that give you an idea of what's going on in the organization and that kind of thing. And I'm just thankful that now people that are 50 plus have a way to contribute and work from home and earn an income. And this is an incredible opportunity. If freelancing didn't exist, and online freelancing particularly didn't exist, and the whole idea of remote work didn't exist, there would be the valuable contributions of the most experienced people in the workforce would kind of disappear, because that's what we're looking at, for most people 50 plus, you can pretty comfortably say this isn't your first rodeo. You've lived through things like 9/11, big shifts in the world. You've lived through potentially gas crisis. You lived through financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. So you've had lots of experience figuring out how to come back from these things. There are at least a couple generations that don't know how to come back from them in a business context. I mean, it may be people that were alive then, but they were kids. They were in elementary school, maybe high school. But when they were in high school, saying, "Wow, that's a really bad thing," you were working in a business and saying, how do we adapt? What do we do? How do we change things? How do we prevent more things from happening in a negative way? That sort of thing. So all that experience is extremely valuable, but if you can't get it into the system, that's very unfortunate. So the next thing I want to talk about is I'm thankful for these online networks. And for people that are new to freelance online networks, they say, oh, wow, I can go online, I can earn money. This is great. And what many don't realize is that all the major networks that are out there today were started over 20 years ago. Most of them were started, you know, 1999, uh, 2000, 2001. So they've been around for quite a while. And the real advantage that these networks brought to the online world of freelancing were that it really helped you reach out globally and find work you could do as a freelancer. So, for example, when you would freelance in the old days, before these networks and that kind of thing, you would go to a chamber of commerce meeting or something, and you would pass out your cards and say, hey, I'm a freelancer, I could do this for you, I could do that for you. Then you'd have a lot of awkward conversations with people that may have shown some interest, and then you'd have maybe a few proposals that went back and forth, and then you'd try to convince them to spend the money and that kind of thing. And you would get to a point where I know when I first started this as my own, being working on my own as a freelancer in 2000, that there was just a lot of preparation and that kind of thing to go out and find a single job. And when I would propose on jobs for clients, potential clients, I would get about 1 out of 3 of those. And anybody in the consulting business at that time would tell you that that's a great record in terms of bringing in business. If you can get 1 out of 3, if you're not used to doing business, you have this sense of, well, you just send a proposal and they accept it and then you do work. Well, things change within businesses. There's lots of kind of ups and downs, and it could be in cash flow, it could be in projects, it could be things like seasonal activity, like they're really busy around the Christmas season, or they're really busy around the tax season, or that kind of stuff that just shuts everything else in their business that they're doing that might fit into a freelance kind of a thing. They just have to put that on hold until they come out of that season. Well, with these online networks, every day it's estimated that there's about a 500,000 jobs in there every day. In a system like Upwork, which is the largest one in the United States, you have between 200,000 and 250,000 jobs on there just about every day. And that's a ton of opportunity. And the great thing about that is you don't have to go to the Chamber of Commerce meeting. You don't have to, ask a lot of embarrassing questions, create a proposal, turn in the proposal, have the awkward part of saying, does this price make sense? Should we get started? No, I'm not ready to start yet. I might want to change something. You just go back and forth. You're getting to people on these online networks where somebody says, here's the job I want done. Tell me what your qualifications are to do it and how much you would charge. So you cut out all that kabuki dance that goes on before you get to that point of, I want to spend money now. I want to make this happen now. So very important to realize the acceptance of now using these networks. And, I talk to people all the time on our Tuesday night call that say, hey, I just got a job from a company in Croatia that wanted me to proofread a 5-page document. They're shocked, that they're working for a company in Croatia, but the people in Croatia are preparing the document for a U.S. company. It's going to be information that's going to be disseminated by a U.S. company, and they just want to make sure it's perfect. And if you've ever seen materials that are created by somebody who's not a native English speaker, oftentimes their documents, while maybe very good, do need a little bit of editing and proofreading before they're delivered in their final form to an English speaking audience. So, something to consider there. The other thing I'm thankful for is that uh, most businesses, most nonprofits, most government agencies have a completely different idea of what a workforce is. You know, 18 months ago, a workforce was employees. You know, you had employees, and some companies had contractors and that kind of thing. And there might be a few other items. What people are realizing, businesses owners and executives and nonprofits and government and that kind of thing, is that we can no longer have that kind of monolithic model where when we need something, when we have more work, we've got to bring in another person. Uh, Bringing in people is complicated. A lot of times it implies them moving. A lot of times it certainly is. Uh, there's just a lot of setup and preparation to hire an employee, and the work to be done, has to take the time, the full time of the employee. I mean, if you hire somebody to be an employee and they're going to work 40 hours a week and that kind of thing, that's a whole different thing than if you recognize that you're getting ready to go to a trade show and you need somebody specifically skilled in that. And this is a very important but subtle concept in companies before freelancing came along. You may have had a trade show twice a year. So you had to get the booth together and you had to get all the materials and you had to make sure all the signage was up to date and you had to make sure you had the fishbowl there for people to drop business cards in and all the other things that go along with going to a trade show. And what it meant is that a part of your company worked very hard for maybe 60 days before the event, making sure everything was ready, making sure everything got shipped to where the show was, make sure all the people got assigned properly and that sort of thing. And that happened. And then immediately after the trade show, you had to make sure that the cards got out of the fishbowl and into the hands of the salespeople, that the booth got shipped back to you or wherever it needed to go next, and that kind of thing. But it wasn't a full-time job. There were 2 months out of the year where this happened. And the problem with that is that most companies had, a Charlie around who was in the marketing department, and he kind of knew what needed to be done. He'd been to a few trade shows, so he knew what needed to be done, and he would be tasked with the job of doing that. The problem with Charlie is that Charlie wasn't really an expert at this. He was somebody that was kind of making it up as he went along, and he was pulling up emails from before and maybe looking at a project checklist or that kind of thing, trying to put it all together. Well, when freelancing came along, you were able to hire somebody that was really good at this. Somebody that did, 20 trade shows a year. They really knew how to make it happen. They had their own systems. That's the person you want to, bring in and make sure it happens. You get 2 months potentially of very concentrated and expert effort, and then that person disappears from your expense structure. This is the whole idea of building flexibility into the way your organization works. It doesn't have to be a full-time employee. It doesn't have to be somebody that has, vacations and all the things that go along with that, because this freelancer is typically deciding that the flexibility of bringing an expert in for 2 months and probably paying a little bit more, but not a lot more, is much preferable to hiring another person to be responsible for that over a 12-month period, but they're not really comfortable in making sure that those events happen. So that's uh, another, sort of thankful for, that people are realizing that we just don't hire employees and fire employees when things get bad and that kind of thing. They're realizing that there's this extra resilience they can tap into, and they can tap into these people from around the world. If your company is based in Cincinnati and you have a trade show in Las Vegas, the person that's coordinating that trade show doesn't need to live in Cincinnati or Las Vegas, because now they can do that from anywhere in the world. So, a very important concept that many business owners, managers, government managers, uh, nonprofits have realized in the last 16 months. Their mindset is different about how to put their organization back together after the pandemic. The other thing is that employers have realized that really what they're bringing into the organization are skills. It's not so much occupations. They can look at it at a different level. If you've ever eaten in a restaurant and they have the special today and it has, what you really like, but it also has a few things that you don't like, you'd like to fine tune it so that they don't put those on the plate. There was a time where I just couldn't stand the taste of green peas. And if I saw green peas on my plate, it would ruin the meal for me. I couldn't eat anything else in the meal. Thankfully, I overcame that. And but it's that kind of thing. You want to have somebody that can hone in on that activity, make it happen, uh, focusing just on the skills rather than having to think, will this person be a good uh, team player all the way around? Because that's not really an issue. They're not going to be in the office. Yes, they do have to work with somebody. So you want somebody that has good communication skills and good relationship skills, but you don't want somebody who uh, has to be a full-time employee and has to be somebody that when things slow down, you're able to find meaningful work to keep them busy and that kind of thing, which certainly a lot of that goes on. I can't remember, especially this time of year, this is when we uh, cleaned up the filing cabinets, when we did all the final documentation on the projects we finished through the year, all that kind of thing happened. So, as we, that's pretty much what I wanted to cover. So as we sign off here, and we know that usually a couple hundred people watch this on the playback, I'd love for you to put what you're thankful for into the chat window, and we'll follow that discussion and talk with you in there in our private Facebook group. That's where this goes. It also goes to our public Facebook group, and it also goes to our YouTube channel. So we're happy to uh, do that. And Elaine, good to see you. Thanks for the like. For those of you watching live or those of you watching the playback, if you enjoyed what you heard here, got something out of it, we always appreciate the like. So with that, have a good Thanksgiving. This is our last call before Thanksgiving, but I will be on here live next week. So looking forward to talking to you then. So have a great Thanksgiving for those of you in the U.S. and for everybody else around the world. Just take this opportunity for reflection and thankfulness around the different things in your life that are going to make your next decade amazing. Take care.